from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Our telephone number, if you want to join the conversation, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833, the number 4, and Valdez. Of course, you're welcome to join the conversation. President Trump was arraigned today in court in Miami, entering a plea of not guilty. And before the president made any formal comments and went back to his home in New Jersey, his summer home, the Trump Golf Course in Bedminster, New Jersey, he stopped. He stopped off at the Versailles Cuban restaurant, right? I'm not the only one that stops off at the Cuban restaurant for some coffee. Trump also stopped off at a Cuban restaurant in Miami before heading back on Trump Force One to make it back to New Jersey. And according to the Post-Millennial, he was met with very warm enthusiasm from lots of supporters. There were lots of supporters in Miami. They're showing love to the former president, rocking their Trump flags and letting everybody know, who they supported. And, of course, he ordered food for everybody at the restaurant, picked up the tab, prayed with the folks that were there, allowed them to pray for him, and went about his business and his journey to Jersey. And upon getting to Jersey, and this happened just a little while ago, I'd say about an hour ago, he gave a statement. We have some clips of that. I want you to listen to this.
Today we witness the most evil and heinous abuse of power in the history of our country. Very sad thing to watch. A corrupt sitting president had his top political opponent arrested on fake and fabricated charges of which he and numerous other presidents would be guilty, right in the middle of a presidential election in which he is losing very badly. This is called election interference and yet another attempt to rig and steal a presidential election. More importantly, it's a political persecution like something straight out of a fascist or a communist nation. This day will go down in infamy, and Joe Biden will forever be remembered as not only the most corrupt president in the history of our country, but perhaps even more importantly, the president who, together with a band of his closest thugs, misfits, and Marxists, tried to destroy American democracy. But they will fail, and we will win bigger and better than ever before.
Now, of course, as the crowd cheered on, and the crowd was there in full effect in Jersey at Bedminster, cheering him on, he continued. He went on to talk about how the charges against him are bogus. Listen.
Charging a former president of the United States under the Espionage Act of 1917 wasn't meant for this. An act for a crime so heinous that only the death penalty would do, and threatening me with 400 years in prison for possessing my own presidential papers, which just about every other president has done, is one of the most outrageous and vicious legal theories ever put forward in an American court of law. The Espionage Act has been used to go after traitors and spies. It has nothing to do with a former president legally keeping his own documents.
Now, former President Trump went on to correct the record and let everybody know that while we might be seeing reports of boxes strewn about and scattered all over the place, that this was really the handiwork of the FBI when they were raiding his home, staging these photos by making a mess of things. Listen to this.
They were putting documents all over the floor. Remember that famous picture? All over, said confidential, said presidential, said all sorts of things. And it was supposed to be there like it was that way when they raided. It wasn't that way. They put them there, took the picture, and released it illegally to the press.
Now, throughout the speech, Trump maintained his innocence, reiterating that he followed the law.
I'm not the one who thinks I'm above the law. I'm the one that followed the law. I'm the only one. It's Joe Biden and his corrupt Department of Injustice who think they are above the law. Never before have the two standards of justice in our country been more starkly revealed.
Now, of course, President Trump was wished a very happy birthday by the crowd. He turned 77 years old tomorrow on Flag Day, and the crowd made sure they reminded him of that when they busted out with their rendition of Happy Birthday. Listen to this.
Nice birthday, isn't it? Birthday. Wonderful birthday. They were saying happy birthday. I was with Eric and Laura, the kids. Happy birthday, Grandpa. Happy. And I said, oh, great. I just got charged with, they want 400 years approximately. If you add them all up, a fake 400 years. Oh, thank you, darling. That's so nice. It's a wonderful birthday. We're going to make it into the greatest birthday of all. We'll make it into the greatest of all.
So that's President Trump, of course, and we'll continue that discussion throughout the program tonight with your phone calls and some of our guests. But I also wanted to remind you that while all of that's happening, there's absolutely no discussion from the media or anywhere else, really, on Joe Biden's culpability in the accusations that have come forward from the Oversight Committee and the work that they're doing. Well, lots of things have been unearthed about Joe Biden knowing things. There's reports that Joe Biden may be on certain recordings. And again, I haven't heard these recordings. I would suspect that if such a recording exists, we'd probably have heard it already. Just like the famous PP tape where Trump was alleged to have been urinating on a prostitute. Again, sounds like a fabrication, as it was. And just like this, I think I can't help but think if somebody had a tape of Joe Biden doing the wrong thing, just like when he went to the prosecutor and said, well, son of a gun, and they fired the prosecutor so that they could get the $1 billion in loan guarantees. That was on video, and that we've seen that video plenty of times. I don't think there's anything new to add here, but if I'm wrong, hey, happy to be wrong. I just don't think that that's going to be the case. However, that's where we are. So Joe Biden, right? Joe El Baboso Biden. He's got a lot of splaining to do, and we're going to continue our conversation on Joe Biden as well as what's going on with this fascination with the first federal indictment of a former president of the United States. So many in the media seem to be not taken aback, but almost awed, A-W-E-D, awed by the indictment. And it's a sad day. I think it's a sad day for law and order. It's a sad day for America. But, of course, I think President Trump handled it, honestly, in stride. He was kept it classy as one could keep it, despite the unfortunate circumstances. So we're going to continue our discussion on that, as well as a bunch of other topics that we're going to get to, and I'll announce those as we move out throughout the evening. If you want to join the conversation, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to it.
This is America at Night. Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And continuing our discussion, we are going to discuss what's going on with this indictment. And I was reading a fascinating piece earlier this morning. I said, man, we've got to get him on. It's by Lee Smith. Lee Smith, he's been on the program before. He's a journalist and author, former senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, and former senior editor at the Weekly Standard. Lee Smith, welcome.
Hey, Rich, thanks so much for inviting me on. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Yes, sir. Likewise. Always good to speak with you too, Lee. And I
hope my reception is okay. I'm having problems where I am with the reception, so I hope it's okay because I'm really keen to speak to you and your great audience tonight.
Well, thank you, brother. So far, so good. You sound terrific, but I know that the Chinese are working very adamantly to interfere with their spy base in Cuba. Anyway, let's jump into your piece, because I know you've got a piece where the headline is "Special Counsel Lied in Trump Indictment," and now the Department of Justice fears what will happen with Judge Eileen Cannon. Take us through it right from the top.
Well, I mean, there's a page in the indictment where they're supposed to say if there's a related case, and of course there is and the special counsel team said no, there are no related cases to this, but of course there is a related case, and the related case was the lawsuit that President Donald Trump, the front runner for the 2024 nomination, brought in August. Petitioning for a special master to go through, an impartial observer to review the classified documents that the DOJ was holding. And that case was eventually dismissed, but that is still a related case. And the DOJ lied, said there was no related case. And it seems the reason that they lied about this because they want to avoid Judge Eileen Cannon, who was the judge in this August 2022 case. And you'll remember as well as I do, Rich, I mean, all the noise and all the attacks directed at Judge Cannon's way. And of course, this is because she was a Donald Trump appointee. So they accused her of all sorts of biases and prejudices, and so they're fearful. The Department of Justice, the special counsel team, was fearful of drawing Judge Cannon, and now, of course, they've drawn precisely the person they didn't want to get, because this may be one of the few judges in that Southern District of Florida, according to my source, the great Kash Patel, who will give Donald Trump a fair trial. So the Department of Justice and the special counsel team, led by Jack Smith, they are apoplectic, and you see all the noise now throughout the attack dog media going after Judge Cannon, demanding she recuse herself. Whether this is Harvard Law School professor Lawrence Tribe, or as I refer to him in the pieces, Democrat blocking back Norman Eisen, the founder of Crew in Washington, D.C., which is responsible for jamming up all sorts of American patriots who want to do the right thing. So, yeah, they are furious now that Donald Trump has drawn Judge Cannon, because what they want is they want to conduct a show trial, right? And as I argue in the piece, the purpose of the show trial, as for all show trials, whether this was the Soviet Union, whether it's now in communist China, is to desecrate the rule of law, in our case, to desecrate our Constitution, our justice system, and to demoralize the public. Here it's at least half the public. But this is an attack. Again, this is not just an attack on Donald Trump. This is an attack on our justice system. So, in effect, that's what the piece is about. And, of course, there's so much going on today, so much going on last week, with it becoming apparent that the DOJ and FBI are shielding Joe Biden from information, again, damaging not just to the Biden reelection campaign, but to the Democratic Party as a whole and to the Department of Justice as a whole. So I'm actually, Rich, I may sound nuts, but I'm actually quite optimistic that the center of the deep state is starting to weaken. They can't absorb these many blows. There are too many instruments right now. And I'm optimistic that truth and justice will out.
Wow. So I just want to reiterate this and make sure that I got it right. So the Department of Justice Special Counsel team that's led by Jack Smith was not accurate, right? There was a lie in their 37 count indictment against former President Trump, saying that there was no other similar or related case in this jurisdiction when they're supposed to notify that. This way they don't have any type of conflict of interest. And they did that hoping that they would avoid going with this particular judge, Eileen Cannon, who, when she reviewed the documents in a related portion of this very case, she said, okay, I'm going to award Trump or allow Trump to get the special master that he's requesting to review the documents to determine, whether they were, as he was saying, personal records or presidential records, and what had privilege and what didn't. And it was that case that has this relationship. And because they seemingly forgot, and you're talking about an entire team of lawyers from the Department of Justice, this is not just a simple clerical oversight. Maybe one could try to sell that story. I wouldn't buy it. Not when it's the special counsel and the assistant special counsel and everybody else that's working for them. So they go ahead and they check the no box. No, we don't have anything else. And they go ahead and do that. And this was explained to you by your source, who's been a frequent guest on this program, Kash Patel, former federal prosecutor, former chief of staff at the DOD, and somebody who understands this very intimately because he was himself, one of the chief investigators and attorneys in Russiagate, Kash Patel. And that's where we've landed thus far. Did I get it right?
Thank you very much for an excellent summary. I went a little far afield there. I got a little over enthusiastic.
No, you're fine.
You're exactly right. And it's important to point out, I think, and important to add, that Kash also tried cases in the Southern District of Florida. He lived in Miami, where he tried cases on both sides as a federal prosecutor and a federal public defender. So he knows what's supposed to happen down there, and he was the one who noted this issue. And here's the thing: by lying on that form, they expected it. They expected that it wouldn't. They expected to get away with it, and by the time that it was noticed, it would have been too late, right? No one would have called them out. Oh, procedural error. Too bad. Now we're into the trial already, and we've got the kind of judge that we want, someone who's going to hang Donald Trump out to dry. So it's an indication of what the special counsel team is about. And
let's pause right there, Lee Smith, and we'll come right back to you, folks. We're on with Lee Smith. He's the author of the book, The Plot Against the President. Make sure you check that out. Grab a copy or two of that. And he's written this amazing piece that's on locals.com. And we're going to continue working our way through this piece because I think it's very informative and well-written piece. I'm Rich Valdez. He's Lee Smith. We're coming right back. Don't move on.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We're on with the other Puerto Rican conservative. Yeah, that's right. I'm not the only one. I'm the one from New York. Lee Smith is the one that was born in Puerto Rico. Lee Smith is with us. He's the author of The Plot Against the President. He's also got this great piece on locals.com. Now, Lee Smith, tell us, before the break, you told us about the impact that this was having on the deep state. And one name in particular that I see mentioned here is Norman Eisen. So let's pick up where you left off and tell us who this character is.
Well, I got to say, the person who really brought this character to my attention is the great Darren Beattie at Revolver News. And Darren has done a lot of terrific coverage of the different stuff that Norm Eisen has done. I believe another person who's covered him very well is a man named Mike Benz, who's the executive director of the Foundation for Freedom Online. Because what these guys have done is they've really done a very good job of covering. Now, Eisen is not in government, right? But these guys have been around the Democratic Party for several decades now. One of the things that Eisen did was he founded this organization, allegedly or self-described, so-called watchdog group called Crew. And Crew first came to my attention in 2017 when it instigated an investigation of then chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, claiming that he had revealed classified information, when in fact what Devin Nunes did, and as we know now, and of course this is what Plot Against the President is about, it's about how then Chairman Nunes uncovered the biggest political scandal in U.S. history, namely the Barack Obama administration's unlawful surveillance of the Donald Trump 2016 campaign for president. So we see people like this, like Eisen and others, popping up periodically, because I call them these the deep state irregulars, right? These are not people who are in the major bureaucracies like DOJ, FBI, CIA, State Department, but these are career Washington careerists, right? This is how they make their living. It's how they make their name. It's how they serve. It's how they serve the regime by always and not only in supporting roles, but in leading roles as well, but not necessarily inside government.
Yeah, well put. And I think that's how they work best, when they have all of this external apparatus where they can do what they do. So Eisen is an activist. He's a lawyer, and he's created this organization called Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, which claims to be a watchdog group, but really is more of a political hack outfit that's gone after Devin Nunes in the past. So now tell us how all of this ties together and what you think happens with Judge Cannon moving forward.
Well, we know for a fact, and this is just, we know for a fact that the attacks on Judge Cannon will continue, and they will demand that she recuse herself. And so the question will be, because we've seen this over the last 6 years, Rich, I'll cite one very important example, and that was Attorney General Jeff Sessions. And we remember how Democrats and how the media compelled Sessions to recuse himself from election-related investigations related to the 2016 election. And of course, this rightly, I think, infuriated Donald Trump. Look, it seems that Jeff Sessions is a very decent, very honest man. I don't think that that attorney, that he was prepared for the work of Attorney General at this point in our history. Right, I think he was accustomed to Senate chambers where there was a certain amount of polished gravity and respect and politesse. I don't think he understood exactly what the fights were about. When he recused himself from the Russia investigation and from related investigations, that opened the door to basically crippling the Trump administration with the Mueller special counsel and other related matters. And what forced Sessions to recuse himself was the sheer amount of noise and hysteria. And here's what happens, because I covered this in Plot Against the President. What happens to people? The noise is so intense. The attacks are so relentless that people just want it to stop, right? And they'll do anything to make it stop. And they often believe that recusing themselves or getting out of the middle of it will make it stop. But here's the truth. The truth is that doesn't make it stop. You know what makes it stop? Nothing, because these people are pathological. They're lunatics. The only way to get through this is to get through it. And that's what people like Kash Patel and Devin Nunes showed. They're going to scream. They're going to fight you. They're going to come after you with everything they have. They're going to smear you. Devin Nunes got death threats, right? Look at all the different stuff they're throwing at Kash now, right? They will go after you no matter what. They're relentless psychopaths. So the question right now then is, will Judge Cannon, will she be able to withstand a growing whirlwind of chaos thrown at her, right? Because this is what the DOJ wants, the trial of the century. They're finally going to get Donald Trump. And look, I believe from all accounts that Judge Cannon is a serious legal mind and is a real judge. She's not just in there to serve Donald Trump. She's not, as Eric Holder described himself regarding Barack Obama, Donald Trump's wingman, right? She's a serious judge. So I think that we all hope for a number of reasons, not just for this trial, not just for this case, but we need people, we need strong Americans, we need strong patriots to stand up and say, I don't care what these psychopaths say. They're going to scream no matter what, and they're not going to take control of this country just because they can continue to turn up the volume on CNN and MSNBC and intimidate a bunch of good Americans. And look, Judge Cannon is in a leadership role, right? She's on the bench. That's American leadership. We need strong American leaders. In addition to Donald Trump, in addition to Devin Nunes, in addition to Kash Patel, we need all sorts of Americans to stand up, and God willing, Judge Cannon will be able to withstand the insanity that they are going to unleash, and they've already started to unleash. We've already seen it in the last several days, all throughout the press, on TV. It's mayhem. So God bless her, and we should all stand with her and stand behind her and support her and pray for her too.
All right, folks, we're on with Lee Smith. Lee Smith, author of The Plot Against the President. He's also got some great reporting on locals.com, leesmith.locals.com. And Lee Smith, when we come back, I want you to, you mentioned lunacy and psychopathy, and I couldn't help but think you're making a segue for Joe Biden. So I want to talk about Biden and Burisma and all of the latest that's coming out on Biden. I know you've got some reporting on that as well, and I want to get your opinions on that. So, folks, we're on with Lee Smith. We're coming right back. Your phone calls and more. 833, 4 Valdez, 833-4 Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So there's been reports that Joe Biden allegedly was paid $5 million by Burisma, and that other members of the Biden family were also paid. There's a lot of discussion. I don't see a ton of action going on. Lee Smith, tell us where we are. Where do we land on this?
Well, it's very important, of course, because we've had a lot of information on this over the years that people have just dismissed. I mean, whether we're talking about the great reporting of John Solomon, or whether we're talking about the former mayor of New York City, Rudolph Giuliani, a lot of people have put forth this information on what the Bidens, Hunter and his father Joe, now the president, were up to in Ukraine. And this information has all been dismissed, whether it's been written off as a conspiracy theory or people have just ignored it. And now, both Senator Charles Grassley and Congressman James Comer have been fighting to get this information to the American public. And now we have a pretty clear idea of what was going on. This was an FBI confidential informant who in 2017, I believe it was 2017 when he first reported, that a senior executive from Burisma, this Ukrainian energy firm that famously employed Hunter Biden or had Hunter Biden on its board of directors at a salary of between $50,000 and $80,000 a month, but that they also, that the Bidens demanded $5 million apiece. Hunter Biden and Joe Biden demanded $5 million apiece to shape American policy favorably toward Burisma. And we have a pretty good idea of what that means, given that this famous meeting, this famous panel in New York City at the Council on Foreign Relations, when Joe Biden famously got up in front of an audience, January 2018, he's out of office, and he talked about how basically he extorted the Ukrainian government. He said, if you don't fire the prosecutor looking into Burisma, you are not going to get this $1 billion loan guarantee, right? And it was when Donald Trump got word of this that Trump started asking questions. And this is what he asked the Ukrainian president, was the newly elected Volodymyr Zelensky, asked for help getting to the bottom of what the Bidens were doing. And this is precisely what led to Donald Trump's first impeachment. So what happened here? What happened is that the quid pro quo that Donald Trump was accused of, this was actually Joe Biden's quid pro quo. It wasn't Donald Trump who used U.S. taxpayer resources to rig an investigation. No, this was Joe Biden. He threatened to withhold $1 billion U.S. loan guarantee unless they fired the investigator looking into the company employing his son, Hunter Biden. Now, what's going on right now is fascinating because this is the information that Charles Grassley has come up with. Grassley has also said just recently, there's not just an FBI document, but that apparently the person or one of the Burisma people has tapes, right? Has tapes, including two of Joe Biden talking about this bribe. So it appears that Charles Grassley has pierced the bubble and has gotten to now all of the different things that we've heard about Biden and Ukraine, the Bidens and Burisma. These things can no longer be denied. They can no longer be written off. That certainly the mainstream press is going to ignore it. Certainly the FBI is going to shield it, and the DOJ is going to shield it. But these are real things that really happen. And that's what we're looking at. This merits, at the very least, an investigation, and we'll see where this investigation goes. Will there be? Congress should certainly be pushing on this as hard as possible, the House as well as the Senate. But this is a very, very important development in U.S. history because we see, if we match this up with the Trump indictment, we have a better, clearer understanding of what happened in 2016, 2020, and the present. Donald Trump correctly says this is election interference, what's happening now, the DOJ indictment. However, it's not just election interference. This is also an 8-year-long cover-up operation. In 2016, with the DOJ, the purpose of the FBI's interview of Donald Trump was to find out if the Trump campaign knew anything about Hillary Clinton's emails, right? The emails that she had ostensibly deleted from her private, unsecure server. The FBI wanted to know what the Trump campaign knew, and if anyone was going to drop this presumably evidence of her own financial arrangements with foreign figures, if they were going to drop this as an October surprise. We know what happened in 2020, famously, hiding reports of Hunter Biden's laptop, also with evidence of Joe Biden corruption. The same thing is happening now at the exact same time, right? They're fitting Trump for Biden's crimes and abuses. So I think it's very important to see it in that way. It's not just election interference. This is also a cover-up for corruption of the Democrats' presidential candidates from 2016 to 2024.
And, Lee Smith, I'm curious to see something Senator Grassley has also said, that the executive that's listed in the FBI form FD 1023 that the informant reported on, that executive possesses 2 audio recordings of phone calls between the informant and then, or the executive rather, and then Vice President Joe Biden. I don't know if these things exist or not. I'm just going by the record, what's being reported here. But I tend to believe that when there's discussion about audio tapes and videos, if they existed, I think we'd have seen them or heard them already. My thinking, just like the tapes that they said they had of Trump, right? Which obviously weren't real and weren't true, with Russian prostitutes and whatnot. But again, I don't know. What's your thought on the validity or reality of such tapes?
I think Charles Grassley is a pretty serious guy. He's not Adam Schiff. I don't think he'd be making stuff up on that front. And also, I mean, there were different audio tapes that were surfacing that were coming out of Ukraine. I think that One American News was circulating some of these. I saw a whole bunch of them circulating. Again, I'm in no position to validate these things.
Sure.
But not right now anyway. But
Lee Smith, if you don't mind, can you hang with us for like another moment or so? I just want to make sure everybody has a chance to follow you, and we got to take a quick pause. 833-4-VALDEZ is the number. Lee Smith is our guest. We're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Our guest, Lee Smith, he's author and journalist. He's written The Plot Against the President. He's discussing some of his work that's on locals.com. And Lee Smith, final word to you, sir.
Yeah, Rich, I wanted to say, well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on tonight. I really appreciate it. And great
Likewise.
Speaking with you. Great audience. Look, the point that I think really needs to be made is this, that the FBI and the Department of Justice have sat on this information since at least 2017, right? So through the Trump administration, Attorney General William Barr, the directors of the FBI, James Comey, acting director Andrew McCabe, now Christopher Wray. The point here is that if the FBI and DOJ know that the Ukrainians the head of Burisma, bribed Joe and Hunter Biden, who's running the show here, right? I think the way to see this is this $5 million is what the DOJ has over Joe Biden, right? So I think that we need to broaden our scope here, because it's not just about Biden's family corruption. The heart of it, the heart of corruption right now in Washington, D.C., in a sense, the Bidens are bit players, right? I mean, everyone knows he walks out there and the guy's barely coherent, right?
Yeah.
What's going on, the center of what's happening right here is about the Department of Justice. And the other reason that we're grateful to Charles Grassley and everyone else who's going after DOJ, whether this is Michael Flynn's case that he's bringing in Florida, all the other things, is like people are going at the center, and that's the DOJ. That's the thing for people to keep in mind.
That's the crux of it. Folks, follow him at Lee Smith, D.C. Lee Smith, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Rich. I'll talk to you soon.
You bet. More to come straight ahead. It's America at Night with me, Rich Valdez. 833-4-VALDEZ. We're just getting started. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And former President Trump was arraigned in Miami today, where he entered a not guilty plea. He then went on to visit the local Cuban restaurant, coffee shop, where he hung out with some supporters, which I thought was cool, because that's what I do every day. I go to the local Cuban place, too. And a suspicious package was intercepted outside the Miami courthouse where Trump was going to be arraigned. And there was speculation on whether it was something dangerous or whether it was the FBI's latest attempt at injecting something into the mix, like an informant. But it turned out it was just a television that was delivered that way. And it caused a little bit of a stir. And in other news, on the border, the United States has extended temporary legal status for over 300,000 immigrants. This wasn't expected, and now they get to stay a little bit longer. And it, to me, sheds some light on the grander issue of things. What is going on, and why do we continue to utilize these policies and programs that don't seem to be benefiting the country or the country's immigration needs? Now, I have, of course, my speculation on those things, but somebody who understands this issue from an academic perspective is Mandy Gunasekara. She's a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation, and she is our guest. Mandy, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
Likewise. So I'd like you to walk us through it. Now, a couple of your colleagues, Tom Homan and others, have been on the program discussing the parole program and others. But if you could just bring the audience up to speed and let us know, what it is, how the administration is using it, and why you feel it's effective or problematic, that would be terrific.
Yeah, well, admittedly, I haven't been in the depth of the weeds on this particular issue, but largely speaking, we went from a very stable situation at the border that was defined by strategic policy changes that started from day one in the Trump administration, meant to institute the rule of law and apply it to the area of immigration, including those who try to get into this country by illegal means. And there's all sorts of mechanisms. I'm sure your listeners are intimately familiar with this, especially if you've had people like Tom Homan on to talk about this as well. But what we've seen in this administration is either a lack of adherence to those policies, or setting them aside, or skewing them so it makes it easier for illegal immigrants to be out in general society, to find their way here, to find it out in general society, and ultimately become a getaway, to be pushed outside of the trackable system. And then you've got hundreds of thousands, up to millions of illegals that have crossed the border since the start of the Biden administration. And they're out in the communities creating all sorts of issues, in addition to overrunning the entirety of our immigration system. So it creates a lot of security problems. It creates a major drain on resources for our Border Patrol, facilities, and it exposes American communities to unnecessary danger and potentially unnecessary harms.
And what are some of the remedies that you're recommending at this point?
Well, we know what works, because these policies were instituted just a few years ago when we took a border situation, an unstable border situation, got it under control, and it was stable. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't completely impermeable. That is not necessarily a realistic standard, but it starts with policies like reinstituting the Remain in Mexico. If you're applying for this asylum status, it doesn't mean you need to come into the United States. It doesn't mean you need to be put on planes in the dead of night and then flown to cities where other areas of the country are supposed to be responsible for this administration's willingness to subvert and set aside the applicable law. So it's things like Remain in Mexico. It's building up the security of the wall. It's also sending a serious message that illegal immigration is in violation of the law, and those who break it will have the full force of the consequences brought against them, including deportations and keeping them out of the country. So all of these policies where it makes it easier for illegals to cross the border and then to stay here in the United States, either at a facility or to be let out into the community, purportedly under some sort of supervision or some sort of parole status, that just invites others to come in and to break the law, because at the end of the day, what we've seen is they get lost in the mix. They get lost in the mix. They don't necessarily have to show up for court dates. They don't necessarily have to show up to defend their asylum claims. And then you have the problem that is ultimately created. So it's just a reinstitution of the policies that we had working effectively during the Trump administration, and I've named just a few.
Yeah. Now, I also wanted to pick your brain a little bit on some of the work that you do for the Center for Energy, Climate, and Environment. Tell us about some of that.
Yeah, certainly. So, our tagline is promoting energy policies that work, protect the environment, and create thriving communities. And all of this stems from a lot of the work that I did while in the Trump administration at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, where balance was a key part of everything that we did. One doesn't have to sacrifice economic development and related prosperity for purposes of protecting the environment. And just like the border situation, where we proved with smart, effective policies aimed at addressing the problem instead of perpetuating it for political reasons, you can address these issues. It's the same in the environmental context, and what it requires is a degree of balance, and that is a lot of the work that we do over at the Independent Women's Forum's Center for Energy and Conservation. And so we don't just focus on the environmental protection aspect, we also focus on the need for biodiversity and wildlife protection, but again, in a balanced way that doesn't undermine people's private property rights or use of lands for the public to enjoy in ways that are that aren't necessarily prohibitive, but conservative based, and produce a balanced outcome to the benefit of the environment, the plants and the animals in the environment, as well as we, the people, that can enjoy it.
How do you find a way to strike such a balance? Because I know oftentimes a lot of the critique that we have on environmental policy is that it's overreaching and it's the government going further than they need to go in the name of climate change, et cetera, et cetera. How do you find such a balance?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, you have to root out a lot of the fear-based rhetoric, especially when it comes to climate change. There is no pending crisis of which we have no tools to mitigate the effects of. It's actually quite the opposite. We know how to build a strong economy and prop up thriving communities while protecting the environment. Now, admittedly, that hasn't always been the case. We have a history of serious pollution creating major environmental problems. But today we have a much better understanding. We have much deeper knowledge of relative science. And importantly, we have innovative engineers that have figured out better, more efficient processes for us to extract, refine, use the type of resources we need that makes our economy work. So it's getting away from emotions and fear-based rhetoric that defines a lot of the environmental left. It's looking at what is exactly the problem, what tools do we have to fix it, and making sure that those environmental protections are implemented in a way that it doesn't create adverse impacts or unintended consequences, such as major loss of jobs or relegating entire communities to a lifetime of poverty or dependence on the government. Because what we've seen in those instances, that actually lends itself to environmental degradation instead of environmental progress. So it's it takes a lot more work to achieve that balance. But the good news is, and what we found in the Trump administration, is there's a lot of people that are committed to it, including state officials. A lot of environmental action is it's necessary to be in line with and in communication with the local officials on the ground that know the ins and outs of a specific area, as well as the regulated industry, whether you're talking about manufacturers, job creators, or you're talking about utilities and energy producers. You've got to have an open line of communication, because those are the people on the ground that can tell you if what you're proposing is actually going to work and make the difference that you want to achieve.
Now, Mandy Gunasekara, the rhetoric that we often hear is rooted in fear. It's demagoguery, if you will. That's all you hear from a lot of climate alarmists like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saying the world is going to end in 12 years. And, this has been going on for a number of years, and I don't believe the 12-year number to be real, but John Kerry and others have subscribed to this same alarmist rhetoric. When you say we need to have a departure from that, I agree with you, but I think, what does responsible climate policy look like?
Yeah, so it looks like a combination of factors, but leading the charge is technological innovation. And if we're talking, let's talk about the energy industry, because that typically tends to be the target of a lot of the solution to the fear-based rhetoric. It's we need to shut down fossil fuels, cancel off fossil fuels is a quote from our president.
Kill the economy.
Kill the economy, exactly. And so that's totally unnecessary. And I'll tell you, a lot of the fear-based rhetoric is a misrepresentation of the actual climate science that is out there. Not a lot of people dig into and read the gory details of scientific papers that are often mischaracterized. But what a lot of people will allude to when talking about the state of climate science is references to policy summaries of climate science that are written by activists. I'm alluding to some of the science that comes from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is an arm of the United Nations dedicated to assessing a variety of climate change science and its interaction with the atmosphere and then our day-to-day lives. There's a lot of versions of that. The science itself tells one story that isn't all doom and gloom. And then there's a summary of the science that is put together by more of the activist-oriented officials that permeate the United Nations, called the Summary for Policymakers. And what you often hear people alluding to or referencing is that summary that literally is built on worst-case scenarios that have been proven wrong time and time again. So if we're talking about the energy sector, one of the leading policies from those that propagate fear-based rhetoric around climate change is something called net zero. Maybe it sounds good. Let's get to net zero emissions by 2050 is something that's actually being pushed by this administration. But first and foremost, it's not realistic, because 80% of the energy we use for our economy and day-to-day lives comes from coal, oil, and natural gas. So to get rid of that in a matter of a couple decades truly is to tank the economy and the modern way of life we've become accustomed to, that has actually lifted so many people out of poverty. And it's led to things like refrigeration, advanced medicine, and a reliable food chain system. And we could go on and on and on. But all that being said, it's instead of banning it outright, it's all about figuring out more efficient ways to extract and use those resources, of which we have a ton of advanced technology and alternative technologies. There's also things like nuclear that are very promising, but the big thing holding that up is the federal bureaucracy that won't necessarily get out of the way of this promising technology.
And that's something I want to follow up with you on, this administration's position on energy production and overall our position as an energy producer. Folks, we're on with Mandy Gunasekara from the Heritage Foundation. We're going to continue with her straight ahead. Don't move them up.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez. Our guest is Mandy Gunasekara. She's a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation. And Mandy, my question for you is, the United States was, and I think still is, a top energy producer, but we're not nearly cranking out as much as we did. What's your position on that, and what's up with the bureaucracy that is slowing down production to the levels that we had a couple of years back?
Yeah, so there's one analysis out there that said, had the Biden administration not instituted the barrage of regulatory barriers that they've erected, making it harder to produce energy in this country, just looking at oil, we would be producing at least 2 million barrels of oil per day more 2 million barrels of oil per day more than what we currently are. And so there's a huge difference between what we could be producing to meet growing demand versus what has occurred under this administration. And they've taken over 100 actions. They call it their whole of a government response, but they've taken over 100 actions aimed at making it harder to produce the energy resources that we need, mainly at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Interior, but other agencies as well. And so that's manifesting itself with suppressed supply, which makes the price of gas and everything else go up.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I wish we were in a better position. Now, final question. We have a caller, Rich in Phillipsburg, Kansas, on KRVN. And his question is on the immigration topic on Governor Abbott's flotational buoy proposal to use these buoys as a deterrent for folks crossing the Rio Grande. Do you think it's A, is it environmentally sound, and B, is it good immigration policy?
Yeah, look, I think it's unfortunate that state governors have to step up and fill the gap in terms of securing our border, as this president has used his role and resources to step away from it. So I don't blame Governor Abbott for getting creative and trying to deter this influx. Illegal immigration has negative consequences on the environment. So anything to deter the influx of that does have a macro positive impact to the environment. And look, if it's out there and it's a proven tool to deter this influx, then yeah, I think that it should be a part of that state-based immigration policy that, unfortunately, again, the state government has to implement because of the void in leadership on this issue from the federal government.
Right, because they've turned a blind eye. All right, folks, our guest, Mandy Gunasekara, visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation. You could follow her on Twitter at MississippiMG and check out the website, heritage.org, for her work and more. Mandy Gunasekara, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. All right, folks, more to come straight ahead. We're going to talk with Walt Heyer about people that regret having sex change operations. Don't go anywhere.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And the House of Representatives has just voted to protect gas stoves. Of course, this is a big point of contention lately. There's been a lot of back and forth over the banning of gas stoves, or, to ban or not to ban gas stoves. And at a Pride event over the weekend, a trans activist, Rose Montoya, doubled down on going topless at the White House. You may have seen this. I know I saw it on Instagram. President Biden receives a bunch of individuals from the LGBTQ community. I guess it was a Pride event at the White House. And some of the individuals in question were taking selfies with him. And then moments later in the video that I saw on Instagram over the weekend, these individuals are removing their shirts and they're going topless in the ellipse, which is in effect the backyard of the White House. And I just thought, wow, that's interesting. And the White House responded in saying they're going to ban these individuals from ever coming back. And then the individuals, including Rose Montoya, responded saying that they meant no ill will and that they were just trying to live in their joy and free the nipple. I know you're thinking you don't believe me, but I want you to listen to this.
My transmasculine friends were showing off their top surgery scars and living in joy, and I wanted to join them. And because it is perfectly within the law in Washington, D.C., I decided to join them and cover my nipples just to play it safe, because I wanted to be fully free and myself. I had zero intention of trying to be vulgar or be profane in any way. I was simply living in joy, living my truth, and existing in my body. Happy Pride, free the nipple.
So that was Miss Montoya's response to the White House announcing that they were going to ban them from future events. Now, while this was controversial for some folks and others, for me, it was just, I really don't care if they were transsexual or not. To me, the issue was who goes to the White House and takes their shirt off? Like, period. Like, I could not imagine doing that. The White House is a very fancy place. I couldn't imagine just going there and saying, hey, I'm really hot today. I want to show off my tattoos. I just don't get it. But that's my thought. To me, the bigger issue here was, what they were referencing was showing off their top scars, right? These are people that have had the double mastectomy as part of a transition surgery, which is now known as gender affirming care, which to me is a term that is a misnomer because it doesn't really affirm a lot of anything, and it doesn't provide care. From my estimation, right? I think there's a lot of people that go through this and they experience regret, which is why there's a website called sexchangeregret.com. The founder of that website is Walt Heyer, and Walt Heyer is with us to tell us about his story of reversing a sex change procedure, detransitioning from a very regrettable outcome because of quote-unquote gender-affirming care. Walt Heyer, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. Glad to be on.
My pleasure. So if you don't mind, we have a little bit of time, and I really want you to take your time with it so everybody can understand your story. Let's start from the beginning, I guess, when you decided that this was the right thing for you to do.
Yeah, well, this story really goes back a long ways, Rich. I started cross-dressing with the aid of my grandmother, who was, back then was affirming me, and that was in 1944, 78 years ago. Wow. I'm 82 years old, and so this was before it was popular. But I think it does show, Rich, is it shows that when you, like my grandmother did, made a purple dress for me, put me in the dress, told me how cute I was, and affirmed me. What you really are doing, in my view, in looking back, self-reflection, is what she was doing was emotional and psychological child abuse. I was not a girl. I wasn't ever going to become a girl, but she was telling me how cute I was. And what happened, and I've said this when I've spoke many times, is that when you do that to a young boy, I was 4, that what you're doing is saying, geez, you're not acceptable as a boy. The only way I'm going to accept you is if you're wearing the purple dress as a girl. And so that's very confusing to a young person, and I think it begins to destroy who he believes he is and begins this journey where you think, oh, man, I must have been born wrong. But it didn't end there because of the purple dress. Because this was done in secret for about 2.5 years, my parents did not know about it. And when they did find out, my dad was furious. And then my dad decided that he was going to sort of shaped me up as a boy with a hardwood floor plank when I did anything wrong. And that wasn't too terrible, but then his adopted brother decided, because I had been wearing the purple dress Grandma made for me when I was 4, I'm now 8 years old, he was going to sexually molest me time and time again. So the purple dress caused me to be hit with a hardwood floor plank by my father and sexually molested by my uncle. Those are, sexual molestation is a crime, and it's something that traumatizes young people, and unfortunately it happens quite a bit. And so I had the surgery, because they weren't doing any surgeries until really in the 70s and 80s, and I had my surgery in 1983, 40 years ago this year, and I lived identifying as Laura Jensen for 8 years, and I studied psychology at UC Santa Cruz and realized that if you begin to do a deep dive into this, you'll find out that many of the people are suffering from things like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, PTSD, all because of something that happened to them. Nobody's born transgender. And what we do is we are manufacturing transgenders. As you mentioned, that gender-affirming care. If we did gender-affirming care, no one would ever have surgery and no one would ever take hormones. Gender-affirming care is, in my view, is something that you would do to maintain that person's biological gender, which is not assigned at birth. It's determined at the time of conception, 9 months before you're born. Everybody likes to say, what gender were you assigned at birth? It's not assigned at birth. It happens during conception.
Outstanding. So just a recap here. So we're talking about mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and the only way out started at 4, went on to 8. How old were you when you decided to opt for surgery?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I started, I was struggling, not realizing that what happened to me as a child was traumatizing. And now today we realize that this is called adverse childhood experiences and that you need a trauma therapist. I didn't know that when I went to the gender clinic or the gender specialist in San Francisco in 1981 and told him my story about cross-dressing and all. He said, oh, you need hormones and surgery. His name was Dr. Walker. And Dr. Walker, by the way, was one of the original persons who drafted the standards of care that are in operation today at the gender clinic. So I went to the number one guy in the country. So he told me I needed hormones and surgery, even though I told him about being sexually abused, emotionally, physically abused. And I went on to have the surgery in 1983 after following the protocols and taking the hormones and so forth. And then realizing after studying psychology that these are mental disorders. They're psychological and emotional, and no one needs hormones and no one needs surgery. And it's kind of interesting to me that, if you tell a lie often enough, the lie that you can change your gender or change your sex, and they've been doing it since, in this country, really since the 70s, if you tell it often enough, people start to believe the lie. It's totally false. No one in human history has ever had their gender or sex changed with hormones and surgery. It doesn't happen. So that's the first thing that when I did my website, sexchangeregret.com, I wanted to find out how many other people regretted going through this like I did. And the first year we had, which was about 13 years ago, about 700 people come to the site.
Wow.
By 2000.
Before you go on, let me just remind everybody about the website. It's sexchangeregret.com. Sexchangeregret.com is the website. We're on with Walt Heyer, and we're going to come right back. Walt, if you don't mind, stick around. I want to continue with the response you got to your website following your surgery. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue with our guest, Walt Heyer. He's the founder of SexChangeRegret.com, SexChangeRegret.com. And Walt discussed with us that he was first given a dress at 4 years old and told he looked really cute in it. Then he was molested, sexually abused by the time he was 8, and physically abused as well as a result. And this continued into his adulthood, where he eventually had his sex change and still had not received the proper mental health care for the trauma, the psychological trauma that accompanied this series of events. Walt Heyer, you were telling us about starting the website and the response that you got.
Yeah, Rich, the first year that we put the website up, SexChangeRegret.com, we had about 700 people. As I began to do some radio shows and things after the site was up, by 2015, we had 356,000 people come to the website. And now we've been doing thousands of views at the site. And I've got over 10,000 emails in my inbox of people asking for help to detransition or to tell me about their story of regret. And so there's literally thousands of people that have had regrettable outcomes and have gone back to living their life as I have. I mean, I lived and identified as Laura Jensen for only 8 years, and that was over 33 years ago. And so, I'm since remarried to a real woman and enjoying helping people. So I guess you could say I'm doing detransition affirming care for people, if I want to take that term. So, and it's just getting worse and worse. And as I said, people believe this lie. And yet when I work with people who've contacted me, and I've had people contact me 3 weeks after having the surgery, all the way up to 40 years after having the surgery, the bulk of people suffer regret somewhere between 5 and 15 years. That's where you get the biggest numbers of regrettable outcomes. And so I've worked with thousands of people, and they will report to me that they never had gender dysphoria, that something happened to them during their childhood that caused them to either not like who they are or become confused about who they were. And sadly, many of them were molested like I was. Many of them came from broken homes, or they had a parent who was incarcerated, or they were physically or sexually, emotionally abused as well. And I think the emotional abuse part is probably one of the more serious and heinous ones, because people don't realize if you cross-dress a boy and tell him, like they did me, that you're better off as a girl, you're lying to them. You're destroying their whole development as a child, and that's hideous. And we're doing it today to kids 2 and 3 and 4 years old. And that lie just gets me, the fact that you cannot change your gender or your sex. The only thing you can do is feminize boys with surgery or masculinize girls using hormones and surgery. Nobody changes gender. And yet we have all of this stuff, like you mentioned, at the White House. This stuff, it's insane, actually, when you get right down to it. It's really disturbing.
Walt, what was the process? And I agree with you. I also think it's insane. But from a compassionate perspective, I think it's insane, and I can't believe it's happening to people. I don't want people to think I'm taking a judgmental approach toward it, because I'm not. But how did you get the healing that you needed to be able to tell your story today, where you realized, you had some surgery? Tell us about the surgery you had, what it was like, and how you reversed it.
Yeah, well, you have all the surgery, where they refer to it as top and bottom surgery, and then the detransition process. The fact of the matter is, you can't reverse the bottom surgery and make it functional. The only thing you can do is reverse it, and it's only an appearance item, and it's not functional like it was. That's destroyed forever, and it's not you're not able to fix it. The top surgery, you can
Before we
pretty
go
well.
on, let me just remind everybody who you are and the website. Folks, we're on with Walt Heyer. He's the founder of SexChangeRegret.com, SexChangeRegret.com, and we're discussing what the transition process was like for him from male to female and then back, as well as what the process of healing was like for him and others that he's encountered through his website, which provides support and guidance for that as well. SexChangeRegret.com. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back with Walt Heyer.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
We're on with Walt Heyer. He is a survivor of gender-affirming care and a sex change operation. He's the founder of SexChangeRegret.com. And after transitioning and going from male to female and detransitioning from female back to male, Walt, final word to you in the last couple of minutes that we have. Let us know, I guess, what that experience was like and whatever final thoughts you have.
Yeah, well, I started going for psychotherapy after I detransitioned. The therapy that, if I had had that before taking the hormones and surgery, I never would have had the surgery because it was never necessary. And so I started that healing process. I also found my faith in Jesus Christ. And
Amen.
All of these things work together to redeem and restore my life in such a powerful way. I've written 7 books, and Trans Life Survivors is one of the great ones, along with Paper Genders. And so I just wanted other people to know if they wanted to detransition, there's help for them. If they've had a regrettable outcome, I'm here for them. And there's 2 sides to this coin. Many of the people who go into it, like I did, they'll live the life for a few years and then decide that they're not going to do it. I'm working with somebody who's out there for 30 years. He's now detransitioning, one at 5 years and another at 20 right now. So we're here. We want to help those people who've had regrettable outcomes and just need someone to talk to and write to. I'm here for them and happy to help them any way I possibly can, because the many lives are being destroyed needlessly, and there should be a lot more of us out there trying to help them restore their life.
Folks, Walt Heyer, sir, you are an inspiration to many. Continue the work that you're doing. Godspeed to you. Folks, check out the website, SexChangeRegret.com, SexChangeRegret.com. You can buy the books there. I recommend buying a copy for yourself and one you could give away and support the cause. Walt Heyer, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure.
You bet. All right, folks, Open Phone America coming up next. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here with you. Give us a call, 833-4VALDEZ. 833-4VALDEZ is the phone number. And what an interesting evening it's been. We heard from President Trump earlier. He made some comments after he appeared in Miami for his arraignment because of his federal indictment on the Espionage Act as well as obstruction of justice. And it's just really does. It's a fascinating thing to me. It's kind of like doing a Rubik's Cube with one hand, let's see, even your left hand. How many people will buy this stuff hook, line, and sinker, where he's guilty. I mean, nobody's above the law. You got to lock him up, throw away the key. It started off with a century of jail time, 100 years. As of today, I think now they're up to 400 years of jail time if you add up all of the potential penalties for what he's done of keeping his presidential records after leaving the White House. I personally think the whole thing is ridiculous and being blown out of proportion. But so many people think, listen, he broke the rules. You got to get him. I mean, just to think that in the 247 years of American history, we've never had another president that brought home a box of their papers from the office, the good old Oval Office. I mean, it's just the whole thing is laughable to me. But this is where we are. And I think it's crazy to think that that's where we are, but that's where we are. And we've got people all over the place that are hating on Trump. But one of his lawyers, Alina Habba, she was outside the Miami courthouse while Trump was inside today. And she says that, you know what, charging Trump while turning a blind eye to Hillary and Biden, of course, all the issue that we're seeing with Biden with this $5 million for him, $5 million for Hunter, $5 million for every other person in the Biden family when it came to the Burisma deal. And again, this is stuff coming from the Oversight Committee of the House of Representatives and Senator Chuck Grassley, who's seen these documents, right? She's saying that is very emblematic of corruption, and I could not agree with her more. Listen to this.
Joe Biden himself retained possession of classified documents that have not been prosecuted. And none of them came into possession of those documents while they were president. None of them were president who, as the head and sole member of the executive branch, has the power to summarily declassify documents. The decision to pursue charges against President Trump while turning a blind eye to others is emblematic of the corruption that we have here. We are at a turning point in our nation's history. The targeting, prosecution of a leading political opponent is the type of thing you see in dictatorships like Cuba and Venezuela. It is commonplace there for rival candidates to be prosecuted, persecuted, and put into jail. What is being done to the President Trump should terrify all citizens of this country. These are not the ideals that our democracy is founded upon. This is not our America.
Now, again, that's Alina Habba, President Trump's lawyer. She handles civil matters for him. You've heard her on this program several times, and I agree with her. This is something we have to take very, very seriously. Of course, President Trump chiming in as well, saying, look, I have followed the wall. I followed the law. I am an innocent man. Check this out.
I'm not the one who thinks I'm above the law. I'm the one that followed the law. I'm the only one. It's Joe Biden and his corrupt Department of Injustice who think they are above the law. Never before have the two standards of justice in our country been more starkly revealed.
I think Trump is accurate there as well in his statement that he followed the law, or as I like to say, the wall. And this is an interesting time, an interesting pivot point in our history where we're watching things we've never watched before. We're seeing things that just have not come down the pike before, but they're here. And as lamentable as it is to watch, it's actually occurring. Anyway, I want to get your reactions and opinions on this and everything else that we're talking about tonight. If you want to chime in on this or our previous guests this evening, feel free to do so. The phone number, 833-4-VALDES. Let's go to Matt giving us a call from Alexandria, Minnesota. KXRA. Matt, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Yeah, hi, Rich. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
how's Jim Bohannon doing? Is he?
Maybe you haven't heard. He retired in October, and in November he passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. No, I did not hear that yet. Oh, dang it.
Yeah.
I liked listening to him.
We all did.
Anyway, well, yeah. What I wanted to talk about was the Biden doing, making sure they fired that Poroshenko guy. Now, from what I understood, it was because he wasn't going after corruption enough, and like all of Europe and everybody wanted him to go, and that's why Biden did that, not because he was investigating Burisma.
Okay. All right. I think there's definitely a discrepancy on that topic, but thank you for the call, Matt. The issue of Poroshenko not doing enough could possibly be something. As far as I've seen it, I think the understanding that I have is that he was kind of ousted from this position because of political pressures. But we will continue with your calls and more as we move forward. Again, 833, the number 4, Valdez, 833-4-Valdez. We're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-Valdez. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-Valdez. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-Valdez. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-Valdez. That's Valdez with an S.
Don't forget, this persecution is being done by the same weaponized agencies that for 7 years have been running illegal psychological warfare campaigns against the American people, much as if they were trying to destabilize a foreign country. From the Russia hoax to the no collusion Mueller witch hunt to impeachment hoax number 1, impeachment hoax number 2, the 51 lying intelligence offers. How about them? They said it's Russia disinformation, and they knew it wasn't.
Of course, that's President Trump giving his remarks in response to his arraignment today in Miami. He gave those remarks outside his club in Bedminster, New Jersey. Let us continue with your calls and reactions to all of the news of the day. Pat in Sedona, Arizona, listening on KNFO out of Colorado. Pat, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Hey, Rich, how did I know you'd take me? You're my buddy. Hey, it's another sad day in this country when a man, okay, now I'm going to tell you, if he's guilty, he's guilty, but he's not. He didn't do anything different than Obama does. And Obama has still papers. Bill Clinton still has papers. And I bet you George Bush has got everything squirreled away that would prove that there was no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So I tell you what they're accusing Donald Trump of is a man who will stand up against the swamp, as you might want to say. Now, what's the swamp? It's all this mumbo jumbo going on in Washington, D.C. You know what? If you take, for instance, other types of politicians, guys maybe not president, but like governors. How about Governor Cuomo and what he did to the old folks' homes in New York City, putting those COVID people in there and giving people the sickness? Now, is he ever going to be found guilty? I doubt it. Such a double standard. People, this is where we've got to draw the line in the dirt. Because I'm going to tell you something. They're all saying that we may not come back from this. If we let this happen to this man, there is no help for us as Americans.
Well put.
Rich, they may come after you, Rich, for saying something derogatory. And that's totally wrong. You're the nicest, most pleasant person on the radio. Very smart, very intelligent, not insulting. And you get people that are that way. And I'm just telling you, this is insanity in its own way. The DOJ and the weaponization of them, and now of course they're threatening our taxes. They'll probably check everybody's taxes. And they checked old Donald Trump's. Was there anything? No. Come on, people. He deserves at least the right that there's a doubt in this allegation.
The benefit of the doubt.
Benefit of the doubt. That's it, exactly. Because, I mean, come on. What president hasn't taken these papers? And I tell you what, the gentleman who's in charge now, Joe Biden, look what he did. And I've heard even facts that he took papers that were top secret when he was a senator. And that's a big no-no. There's a place where they can go to read these papers. But
the skiff.
The skip, and they have to keep everything there. But he took out papers. Now I can't prove if that's true or not. I just heard it on the internet. So take a dime or dozen on the internet stuff, because a lot of people.
No, you could go to FBI.gov and there's a whole federal investigation into Joe Biden with its own special counsel, who are investigating the documents that were found at his home in Wilmington, Delaware, where he parks his Corvette because he had them in his garage. And there are also documents found at the Penn Center at Penn State University. And all of this stems from saying they found documents from his time as senator. So you're right, Pat. This isn't just speculation on the internet. This is a real thing. How did he get these things? Even fellow Democrats were saying, it's a crime if you have these papers. You're not allowed to have the papers. You're not a president. You don't have the ability to declassify them. You have what they call declassification authority. He doesn't have any. And you are only allowed to see these papers in a skiff. So I think you're on to something, Pat. I think many Americans are a lot smarter than the Democrats and the media give them credit for. And we're going to see how this thing plays out. Good to hear your voice, my brother. I appreciate hearing from you. Let us continue. Rose in St. Clairsville, Ohio, KDKA Online. Go right ahead, Rose. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Hi. Love your show.
Thank you.
When the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago and told people to stay outside, there were no witnesses when they went in, and didn't they turn the cameras off? What papers did they add to what Trump had?
Yeah, I couldn't comment on that. I don't know. But I do know we heard President Trump saying that the FBI staged a lot of photos, and they went and they messed things up, and they made a whole big to-do at Mar-a-Lago when they went. And we have a clip of that. Listen to this.
They were putting documents all over the floor. Remember that famous picture? All over, said confidential, said presidential, said all sorts of things. And it was supposed to be there like it was that way when they raided. It wasn't that way. They put them there, took the picture, and released it illegally to the press.
And this, lamentably, is what we see happening, Rose, where they do what they want. And I think that's part of the problem. And I think part of the problem you're alluding to. Trump also mentioned that he had everything on video, and he sent whatever video he had to the FBI and hasn't received any response from them. So I guess we'll keep our ears open to see what's going on there. But excellent point that we don't know. And I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but I think it's important for us to realize there's a lot of angles here. And we don't know what we don't know. And after speaking with former U.S. Assistant U.S. Attorney General Jeff Clark last night, he laid out this case really well, and saying that they had set a number of traps along the way for Trump and his attorneys in order to kind of entrap them in many ways. And the whole thing is dishonest, and it's a shame. Thank you, Rose, for your call. I appreciate it. Big shout out to everybody in St. Clairsville, Ohio. And everybody listening online, Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com. Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com is our website. Make sure you check that out. Let me see. Where do we go from here? Let us go to Doc. He's neighbors with Joe Biden himself, Wilmington, Delaware, WDEL. Doc, go right ahead.
Yeah, I know. I call myself Doc because I know where the bodies are buried in Delaware. I know people that have worked for Joe Biden. He kicked him out of the bus when he got reelected. That's just the fact of the fact. A relative of mine worked for Joe Biden, and that relative helped to edit his papers in the 72 campaign. When he got reelected in 78, threw him under the bus. That's fact. Now then,
wow.
I think I want to run this past you. The FBI was out of control in the Roger Stone raid. They were out of control in the Trump raid, Mar-a-Lago raid. They went through Mrs. Trump's underwear. That's disgusting. That's perversion. Lastly, I think that this is all going to be thrown out by the higher courts. And even if President Trump gets convicted on a minor charge, will be thrown out. I think that he is going to be a martyr to the base no matter what happens. It's going to make him stronger, not only with the base, but in the broad base of the American people who are going to see that this is a major travesty of justice. I'd like your thoughts, Rich.
You know, I want to believe that to be true as well. And I think that's kind of where I land on this. I'm not sure yet, though. I do believe that more and more people, you know, I kind of gauge it on the people I see each day. And Trump today went to El Versailles, which is the Versailles is a Cuban restaurant similar to the one I go to in Bogota, New Jersey. And the guy that's at the place I go to, this guy's a pretty fair guy, pretty open-minded guy. He just happens to hate Trump. And whenever we argue, and he's the first one, no. But if he broke the rules, he did whatever, and he's got to pay the price. Nobody's above the law. He's all the CNN talking points. But I'll tell you, even him, you know, I went there for a coffee, and then I took something to go. And when he was giving me my to-go order, he said, look, you raise a good point. This is political, right? This is a political hatchet job. That they're coming after him because they don't like him. They want to get him out of the way. And he said, you know, and if he wasn't so toxic, they wouldn't do this, but they do it. And he can't stand Trump. But even he realizes that this is a political hit job. And I think as more and more people realize that, that is going to bode well for Trump. I just don't know how confident I am in more and more people realizing that. And I guess that's where I'm at, Doc. But thank you for your call, brother. Good to hear from you. Big shout out to everybody in Wilmington, Delaware, including the Bidens, right? WDEL. Anyway, folks, we're coming right back. We're going to continue this conversation and more on cloning and a woman that woke up at her own funeral. Don't go anywhere.
No hair, no care, and live on the air, it's Rich Valdez.
So Netflix has unveiled The King of Clones. It's a sensational new documentary film featuring unprecedented access to South Korean scientist Hwang Woo-suk, and that's coming out this month. The human cloning research is pretty scandalous, and the documentary gets into that. It also gets into a little bit behind who Hwang Woo-suk is and all about human cloning and how that whole process works. Very interesting stuff. I was scrolling through Instagram the other day, and I saw like a short news report. It's an older one. It's file footage. But I thought it was fitting. Listen to this.
Humans made to order, mothers giving birth to themselves, babies conceived just so their body parts can be transplanted. Come with me into the scary new world of cloning. The nightmarish stuff of science fiction has suddenly become a reality. Behind those walls, there are people with the technology, the ability and the desire to genetically engineer human embryos, to be the first in the world to successfully clone a human being.
Very pleased to announce that the first baby clone is born. She was born yesterday at 11:55 a.m. in the country where she was born. So this will not give you more details about the location. She's fine. We call her Eve.
Clonate is a private company. We founded that 4 years ago, got the funding to really have lab last August. And so now we have 3 scientists working almost full-time in a lab here in the United States with the major goal for us to produce a human embryo by human cloning.
My first gen was born in Jersey. However, I was cloned by Clonate in Canada. My model number is 0112568, if anyone wants to see.
All right, so that's just a couple of clips from that report. And the second woman in the report is Dr. Brigitte Beausalier. She's the director of Clonate, the first human cloning company. And she's been under fire for many, many years because of her controversial positions on things. And Clonate has moved its operations outside of the United States to the Bahamas because they cloned their first baby named Eve, which she mentioned there. And this obviously was something that bothered a lot of people. And it's an issue, right? The whole thing is an issue. Now, the baby she was talking about was a baby sheep. It wasn't a baby human. But the question becomes, when do we do baby humans? And do we create a spare version of ourselves in case our heart goes bad or our lung goes bad, and we can now go to the cloned version of ourselves to harvest our own organs? This is where I think the whole thing becomes tricky, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, and we'll continue the discussion on that as well as the Trump indictment and everything else we talked about tonight. We also had some discussion with Walt Heyer, who transitioned to become a woman and then detransitioned back to become a man, and runs the website sexchangeregret.com. Fascinating interview. If you missed it, I recommend you listen to it on our website, richvaldesamericaatnight.com, richvaldesamericaatnight.com. Let us continue our conversation with our friends all across America and the globe. Let's go to Gil, Manila, Philippines. Gil, go right ahead.
Yes, I've been listening here just about every nighttime, your time. It's 20 minutes to 1 in the afternoon here. A couple of comments, if I may, about your previous guest. The gentleman who was on about the reverse his sex change.
Yeah.
A couple of comments about that. The first sex change in the United States took place in the 1960s or early 1970s. There was a botched circumcision, and then there was an infection, and the male child had to have his penis amputated. So they decided to try to make him into a little girl. And it didn't work. At age 21, that person committed suicide. That was done at the Jones Institute at the Medical College of Eastern Virginia, run by Dr. Jones. Secondly, I think the one who had the best attitude about sexual identification was Rodney Dangerfield, and I'm going to steal one of his lines. The best sexual identification is to be bisexual. That way you get a shot at everybody. So, thank you, Rodney. And I have a famous relative here. If you have a search engine there, I'll give you 3 words. You can look them up very quickly. Elvis, like Mr. Love Me Tender Elvis, Filipino reporter. If you put those 3 words in your search engine, you'll come up with my father-in-law's cousin. And you will see that he had a radio show here too, and he said something that the communists didn't like, and they showed up at his house and filled him full of lead.
Wow!
Just look, Elvis Filipino reporter, and that will come up. So
Wow, that's terrible. I'm sorry to hear that.
you think it's dangerous to be a controversial talk show host in the States, huh? So anyhow.
That's tough.
But okay,
I'm
that's
going to
all
have
I
to
needed.
watch my
That's
back.
all I needed is. Well, there was a famous talk show host in Denver by the name of Alan Berg, and he was assassinated by some white separatists.
Yeah, they made a movie about him.
Probably don't read.
They changed the name, but the movie Talk Radio is about that story.
Yeah, Alan Berg. Yeah.
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 Well, thanks for putting a great spin on this, Gil. I'm so much happier now that I've spoken to you. Anyway, happy Flag Day to you, my brother, and happy birthday to the U.S. Army. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, it's Flag Day too. Don't forget.
Yep. No, it's always Flag Day when it's Trump's birthday. I always remember those two together.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Gil. God bless you. Let me see. Where are we going to go? I just wanted to go to one more here before we take our pause and come back. Let's go to Ann. She's in Fort Worth, Texas, listening on KLIF, the great station out in Fort Worth, Dallas area. Ann, go right ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I have a theory. I have not heard anyone else voice this theory. It's a belief I've had since Biden's possession of classified documents came out. I believe that the reason that they pursued prosecution or even started the investigation against Trump was because they were afraid that Biden's possession of confidential information would come out.
Yeah, it's quite
and
possible.
They wanted to have Trump being investigated before Biden's information came out, and that way they could kind of mitigate Biden's possession.
It seems to me like a plausible thing because so much of the way they run these investigations are by way of leaking information to the Washington Post and New York Times and other, large friendly media entities where they're able to control the narrative. And they leak the information, they leak the photos, and then they kind of turn a blind eye, no comment, I don't know where that came from, blah, blah, blah. But meanwhile, the story's already out there. It's being told, and people are being informed. Whether it's, misinformed or disinformed, they're being informed nonetheless. And it's quite possible that that's exactly what happened. I don't know that it is, and I can't verify that, but it's a very good point. And thank you for your call. Big shout out to everybody in Fort Worth, Dallas area, KLIF. Big shout out to you guys. We're coming right back to your calls and more. 833, 4
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to it.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. So listen to this. A woman starts knocking inside her coffin during her own wake. So the doctors declared a retired nurse, her name is Bella Montoya, they declared her dead following a possible stroke and cardiopulmonary arrest. She did not respond to resuscitation efforts, according to Ecuador's health ministry. The family gathered at a funeral home and held her wake on June 9th, but had to stop when they heard a sound from the coffin. The wake started just hours after doctors declared Montoya dead, according to her son. He said it gave us all a fright. Montoya's son, Gilberto Barbera, told the Associated Press, but he stressed that her condition remains dire. Her family returned her to a hospital immediately. There were about 20 of us at the wake. After about 5 hours of the wake, the coffin started to make sounds. My mom was wrapped in sheets, hitting the coffin, And when we approached, we could see that she was breathing heavily. Barbera said doctors theorized that the cardiorespiratory arrest caused his mother to suffer catalepsy, a trance-like state in which the body goes rigid and has decreased sensitivity to pain. Several functions, such as breathing slow or a breathing slowdown, also are a result from this situation, according to the report here. He says his mother's on oxygen, her heart is stable. The doctors squeezed her hand and she reacted. They tell him that this is a good sign. It means she's reacting little by little. Now he's only asking that his mother's health improves. He'd like her to be alive and by his side. Ecuador's health ministry said this woman, Montoya, remained in intensive care Monday while the ministry opened an investigation into the doctors who treated her last week, and investigators will pay particular attention to the hospital's process for issuing death certificates. Well, duh. I mean, absolutely insane that somebody was dead in a coffin, but actually alive, buried alive. It's like everybody's biggest fear. That's absolute insanity. Let's go to Paul in Zanesville, Ohio on WHIZ. Paul, go right ahead.
Hey, good evening, Rich. No disrespect to that family, but Rich, you got me thinking there. If I woke up at my own funeral and I rose up out of the coffin, I would hope that I'd look out through there and I'd see the pearly gates. But, I might also look out through there and see some family members that I didn't like too well, or maybe some friends or so forth that said they were friends, and I'd say, oh, man, I done went to hell. That's, if you think about it, once you're dead, and the guy, they, said she was dead and she started scratching. Don't you think that maybe, I don't know how to say it. What do I want to say? I'm strapped for words, Rich.
Yeah, well, it sounds like, it's like an aw shucks moment, right? Where you're like, man, I thought I was out of here and not so fast. And somebody's demanding a refund for sure, I think, on this one, Paul.
Yeah. Well, I just thought, that it would just be something that I'd never thought about. I never thought about, dying and then waking up and being alive again. And maybe I'd have a new perspective on life. I don't know. Me
either.
But
I don't think anybody's thought of that one.
Something got me thinking. Yeah, it was just something got me thinking. That's why I like to listen to your show, because you make me think a lot, and I appreciate that, Rich. And sometimes I don't sound so smart. I'm not always the brightest bulb in the pack, but you make me think, and I appreciate that, Rich.
Well, in my book, you're one of the brightest bulbs in the building. So, Paul, thank you for your call. I appreciate you. Big shout out to everybody in Ohio, especially WHIZ, and thanks for tuning in. Let's continue here. Let's go to Rex, St. Albans, Vermont, WVMT. Rex, go right ahead.
Hey there, Rich. I always remember Flag Day by Donald Trump's birthday as well. And I think that's very convenient and cool that it works out that way. Look, I know that Donald Trump, we've got the Republican primary going on right now, but we have to stand behind Donald Trump. People are getting scared off by the fake news media and all of the allegations and the criminal charges against Donald Trump. They are going after all of the people on the right, all right-wingers that are willing to stand up and do something, including the former president and the people from January 6th and the people from Charlottesville, the Unite the Right protests, where they trialed a lot of this stuff on. And there's
oftentimes Trump will say things like, they're coming after you, I'm just in the way. And in many ways, I believe he is just the tip of the spear. And the way that things have gone, you've got FBI whistleblowers that have come out and said things like, we observed our colleagues, like conjuring up, like creating things that didn't exist, saying that there were white supremacist groups in churches, saying that there are white supremacist groups inside of other Republican groups, just to try and make it look like there was something that there wasn't, when these things, in fact, were not even happening. To me, that's concerning. And you raise an interesting point where we really got to be careful about what we see, what we do, how we react to things, because they're definitely out to castigate an entire group of people just because of their politics, and in particular, support for one political candidate. And it's just, it really is remarkable to me. Thank you, Rex, for the call. I appreciate it. Big shout out to everybody in Vermont on WVMT. Your calls and more when we come back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, we're going to do this quickly. We've got calls from Iowa, from New York, from Wisconsin, from Oregon. Looks like here comes trouble. Go ahead, Janesville, Wisconsin, WCLO. Go right ahead.
What's up, Rich?
Hey, man.
Can you hear?
It sounds like you're breaking up, going in and out. Let's go to Jane in Saratoga, New York, WGDJ. Jane, go right ahead.
Hey, Rich. I'll make it quick. I wanted to thank you, as always, for having the gentleman Walt on, and the way he described what he went through was so articulate, and he made it very clear that doubt is okay, and it's okay to question what's happening to you. And I would hope people like that will start talking to our young people. That's what we need. Someone like that. And I appreciate you guys for always having such awesome people on. So there you go.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, let's see where else we can go. Michael, Pendleton, Oregon, KUMA, with like a minute left.
Okay, Rich, I'll try to be quick. Your friend in Oregon here, Michael. It's been a rough day, and it's a tough time for our country right now. So I thought I would share a quick joke tonight from Ronald Reagan. I could see this on my phone. It seems like Gorbachev was late for a meeting at the Kremlin. So he, instead of having his driver drive him, he jumped in the driver's seat where there were speeding cops in Moscow, and of course they got stopped. So one of the cops, they were told to give a ticket to anybody, even Gorbachev. So they went to the car, one of the cops, and then he came back. The other cop said, well, did you give him a ticket? And he goes, no, Gorbachev was in the car. And he said, well, even if it was Gorbachev, we were supposed to. He said, well, no, he was driving, but the man in the back, I didn't know. But he had to be so important, I didn't dare give him a ticket.
Well, thank you for the call. Reagan was a comedic genius. Thank you, Michael, for the call. Take care, good night, and God bless. Hasta la próxima. Until the next time, we're going to do it all again. I'll see you guys tomorrow, but keep it locked right here on this station.